Nothing is more terrifying than the moment someone does what you swore they never could. That's not just a line for effect, it's a fact. Studies in human behavior show that people don't crumble when faced with what they expect. They unravel when reality refuses to match the script they wrote in their heads. And that's exactly what just happened here. They had their little predictions about you, their timelines, their whispered calculations. But you moved in a way that no algorithm, no rumor, and no enemy handbook could have mapped out. Now they're stuck blinking in confusion, replaying your every step like amateur detectives, wondering how the story slipped through their fingers. Suspense? They're living in it. Regret? They're soaking in it. And the funniest part? Some of them are probably trying to convince themselves you got lucky, which is the classic excuse people use when genius passes them by. So buckle up, because what you just did didn't just surprise them. It rewired the whole game. Number 1, you exposed their dependence on illusion. They built their whole strength on illusion, not substance. What looked like power was never real power. It was smoke, mirrors, and a carefully crafted performance meant to keep you second-guessing yourself. They fed you narratives, created false images, and stacked the stage so you would always feel like the outsider staring in at something bigger than yourself. But the truth is, all of it was fragile. And the moment you acted outside of their script, you exposed just how much of their influence depended on your agreement to believe in the illusion. It's not that they were strong, it's that you were made to think they were. Their words, their presence, their control. None of it had true weight without your attention propping it up. You were the oxygen to their fire. The day you stopped breathing belief into their image was the day their flame dimmed. And now they're realizing the uncomfortable truth. They never had dominance over you. They only had dominance over the story you thought was real. This is why your move hit them so hard. It wasn't about the action itself, but about the revelation it forced. You didn't just break through one barrier. You revealed that the walls themselves were paper thin. You showed that the fortress they boasted about was really just cardboard painted to look like steel. That exposure shakes people in ways they can't recover from quickly. Because once the mask slips, you can't unsee what's underneath. They weren't prepared for this exposure because they invested too much in the illusion lasting forever. They never considered that you'd question it, let alone tear it apart. And now they're not just dealing with the fallout of your action. They're dealing with the collapse of their own identity. Who are they when their false image no longer holds weight? Who are they when the audience walks away because the show no longer has magic? That's why they're questioning everything now. They're left scrambling, overthinking, doubting every move they make, because the foundation they stood on has been cracked in plain sight. What once seemed like control has now been revealed as dependency, and the truth is brutal. Without illusion, they have nothing left to stand on. Number 2, you didn't just break their narrative, you made it useless. They didn't just lose their narrative, you destroyed its usefulness. A story only has power if people can keep believing in it. But once it no longer matches reality, it collapses under its own weight. That's exactly what you did to them. Their words, their rumors, their carefully constructed lies could survive as long as you played along or stayed silent. But the moment you acted in a way that proved the opposite, their entire script became meaningless. They can still tell it, they can still repeat it, but now it sounds hollow, almost embarrassing because reality itself refuses to back it up. This is where their real frustration begins. For so long, they relied on repetition. Say something enough times and eventually people start to treat it as truth. That was their tactic. But repetition only works if there's nothing strong enough to contradict it. When you made your move, you didn't just contradict them with words. You brought undeniable proof into the room. And proof, once seen, cannot be unseen. People who once nodded along to their version of things now hesitate because their story doesn't fit the evidence. That hesitation is lethal for them. Doubt spreads faster than belief, and you just planted it where they least expected. The beauty of it is that you didn't need to argue with them to break their narrative. You didn't need to shout or try to convince anyone. You simply made their version irrelevant. That's the kind of defeat they can't stand, because it robs them of control. It's one thing to be proven wrong. It's another to watch your story dissolve into thin air while the truth quietly takes its place. It forces them to face the fact that their influence was never rooted in substance, only in performance. Now they're stuck in the worst position possible, trying to sell a script nobody's buying anymore. They can keep talking, but every word just reminds people of how far off they are from reality. They can double down, but doubling down only highlights their desperation. And deep down they know it. Their story has expired, and your move was the timestamp that marked its end. That's why they're questioning everything, because without a useful narrative, they have no weapon left to wield. Number 3, they mistook your patience for permission. They thought your patience meant you had surrendered. Every time you didn't react, they took it as weakness. Every moment you waited, they counted it as a victory. What they didn't understand was that patience is not the same as permission. You weren't bowing down to them. You were observing, learning, calculating. You were giving them all the rope they needed to expose themselves. While they thought you were passive, you were storing energy. While they thought you were finished, you were simply choosing the right moment. And when you finally acted, the shock came not just from what you did, but from the realization that your silence had never been their safety. This is what unsettles them most. They had become comfortable in their illusion of dominance. They mistook your restraint for fear, your stillness for paralysis. But restraint isn't fear. It's control. It takes more strength to hold back than to lash out prematurely. And when you finally made your move, it revealed that you hadn't been powerless at all. You had been in complete command the entire time, letting them reveal their patterns, their weaknesses, their dependency on your supposed inaction. Now they're left replaying every moment, questioning every silence. They're realizing you weren't ignoring them, you were studying them, you weren't tolerating them, you were preparing for them. That understanding cuts deeper than the move itself because it forces them to accept that they were never one step ahead. They were being allowed to think so. The irony is brutal. They celebrated too early, mistaking delay for defeat. They bragged and convinced themselves you were cornered, not knowing you were the one who had placed them in position. Your action revealed the truth. You weren't behind. You were waiting for precision. And when patience and precision finally collided, the whole illusion they had built collapsed instantly. Now, every assumption they ever made about you feels shaky. They no longer know if what they see is real, because they've learned that you can hold back and still be in control. That uncertainty eats at them. And the hardest pill for them to swallow is this: what they thought was their advantage, your silence, was actually the setup for their undoing. Number 4, you became the variable they couldn't control. They built their confidence on the idea that you would always be predictable. They counted on you responding a certain way, thinking a certain way, and staying inside the boundaries they quietly drew around you. Their whole system, the lies, the manipulation, the false order, depended on you being a character in a play they had already written. But the moment you stepped outside that script, everything they built began to unravel. Predictability is their control mechanism. If they can guess your next move, they can prepare their counterattack before you even act. If they can anticipate your reaction, they can twist it into evidence against you. That's why they studied you so closely, why they obsessed over your habits and patterns. They weren't just watching you, they were programming you. And for a while, they thought it worked. But what they never saw coming was your ability to break your own pattern. You did something that didn't fit the narrative, and in that single moment you became uncontrollable. The real power of being unpredictable is that it exposes their dependence on order. They need structure, they need control, they need everything to align with the plans they designed in secret. When you disrupt that rhythm, you don't just throw them off. You dismantle the very structure they rely on to feel powerful. Suddenly they're the ones caught off guard, scrambling, second-guessing, questioning every assumption they've ever made about you. And here's the sting that makes it worse for them. Unpredictability can't be faked, and it can't be countered with strategy. Once you've proven you can act outside their script, they can never fully trust their control again. Even if you do nothing else, the doubt lingers. Every time they try to move against you, the thought will haunt them. What if they don't react the way we expect this time? What if they flip the whole thing again? That doubt is poison to their system. You became the wild card, the variable, the factor they cannot manipulate into submission. And in a world built on their obsession with control, that makes you the most dangerous element of all, the one they can't contain, predict, or rewrite. You didn't just step off their script, you burned the stage it was written on. Number 5, you turned their surveillance into your proof. They thought surveillance would be their weapon, the ultimate leverage to keep you under control. Every glance, every record, every whispered detail they collected was meant to corner you, to paint you into the version of yourself that fit their agenda. They believed information equaled power. But what they never accounted for was the way that same information would flip on them. Instead of trapping you, it exposed them. Instead of strengthening their grip, it revealed just how much energy, time, and desperation they invested into watching you. What was meant to prove your weakness now stands as undeniable proof of theirs. Surveillance, at its core, always says more about the watcher than the watched. The one being observed goes on living, moving, and growing, while the one watching is stuck, obsessed, frozen in the act of trying to control what they cannot control. And that's exactly what happened here. They thought their endless monitoring gave them the upper hand, but in reality, it revealed their dependence on you. Without you, their system has no purpose. Without your presence, their entire operation collapses into nothingness. That fact alone strips away the illusion of power they once flaunted. Now the evidence sits like a mirror they can't look away from. Every record they hold, every note they made, every piece of proof they thought they had on you is actually proof of them. Proof of their fixation, proof of their fear, proof that they couldn't look away because something about you threatened the very core of their control. And the irony is sharp. The harder they tried to build a case against you, the stronger the case against them became. This reversal cuts deeper than they can admit, because once surveillance becomes evidence of obsession, their authority is gone. They no longer look like leaders or controllers. They look like watchers, stalkers, desperate figures trying to cage what was never meant to be caged. And the truth is undeniable now. The very act of trying to contain you is what revealed how powerless they really are. They thought the spotlight would expose you. Instead, it exposed them. And once people see who was really dependent on whom, no amount of covering up can restore their image. Their weapon has become their confession. Number 6, they thought strength was about force. You showed them it's about timing. They believed strength was about who could push the hardest, shout the loudest, or dominate with sheer force. That's the mindset they operated in, a world where intimidation equals power. They measured victory by how much noise they could make, how many people they could sway, or how aggressively they could impose themselves. But when you acted, you showed them something they weren't prepared to understand. Strength isn't about force at all. It's about timing. One precise move delivered at the right moment can dismantle everything that brute force struggles to hold together. Your action wasn't dramatic or showy. It didn't need to be. Because true power doesn't scream, it strikes where it matters most. While they wasted energy trying to overwhelm you, you conserved yours. While they fought to appear strong, you studied the cracks in their structure, and when the moment came, you didn't have to push against the entire wall. You touched the single weak point, and the whole thing collapsed on its own. That's why your move hit harder than anything they could have done with all their bluster combined. Now they're forced to face a truth they hate. Timing exposes the emptiness of force. Their shouting, their manipulation, their attempts to overpower you suddenly look desperate, even childish, compared to the precision of your action. You didn't need to fight them at their level because you weren't playing the same game. You weren't trying to prove how strong you were in comparison. You were proving how irrelevant their idea of strength really is. The fallout is brutal for them. Everything they built was stitched together by force, intimidation, and pressure. But those things can only hold for so long before they collapse under their own weight. Timing, on the other hand, can change the entire course of events in a second. You didn't just outmaneuver them, you redefined the battlefield entirely. They can't rely on force anymore because now they know one well-timed move can undo it all. And that realization is the true wound you left behind. They can recover from being shouted at, even from being resisted. But they can't recover from knowing that all their strength means nothing if someone has the patience to wait for the right moment. That's the kind of lesson that doesn't just bruise their ego, it haunts them. Number 7. You revealed that their unity was only built on you as the enemy. Their so-called unity was never real unity. It wasn't built on trust, respect, or shared purpose. It was built on you. More specifically, it was built on their shared dislike of you, their obsession with trying to contain you, and their need to see you as the common enemy. That was the glue that held them together. Without that, they had no true foundation. And the moment you outmaneuvered them, the cracks began to show. Because when you're no longer trapped in the role they assigned you, they're left staring at each other with nothing left to hide behind. This is the danger of alliances built on negativity. They feel strong at first because everyone involved is pointing their energy at the same target. But the strength isn't real. It's borrowed. It's shallow. It exists only as long as the enemy they're fighting stays in place. The second that enemy moves differently, grows, or escapes the box they were placed in, the entire bond starts to unravel. That's what you reveal to them. Their unity was actually just mutual dependency on your existence as the villain in their story. And now, without you playing that role, they can't keep pretending to stand together. They have to deal with each other directly, and that's when the truth surfaces. The envy they were ignoring, the personal agendas they were hiding, the mistrust they tried to bury, it all comes rushing out once their scapegoat is gone. You were the distraction that kept their internal fractures from showing. Now those fractures are splitting wide open. The irony is sharp. The very people who claimed to be united against you were, in reality, united because of you. And when you stepped outside their reach, you didn't just free yourself. You exposed how fragile they really were. Their alliance wasn't strength, it was weakness disguised as cooperation. And now that weakness is eating them alive. They will try to rebuild, they will try to regroup, but it won't be the same. Because every time they look at each other, they'll be reminded of one undeniable fact. Their bond only worked as long as you were carrying the weight of being their common enemy. Without that, they're left with nothing but the mess of their own distrust. And that truth is something they cannot unsee. Number 8, they thought they knew your breaking point. You showed them you didn't have one. They were certain they had you figured out. In their minds, everyone has a breaking point, a moment where the pressure, the lies, the manipulation, or the weight of constant opposition becomes too much to bear. That's what they were counting on. They thought if they pushed hard enough, long enough, and in the right ways, you would eventually shatter. Their entire blueprint for control was built on that assumption, that you'd reach your limit and fold under the strain. But when that moment never came, when you refused to collapse, the entire system they built around your supposed weakness fell apart. The unsettling truth for them is that they misunderstood what you're made of. They saw endurance as temporary, strength as conditional, and resistance as something that would fade with time. They didn't understand that your strength isn't borrowed, it's built into you. It's not something you switch on when it's convenient, it's who you are at your core. They were waiting for a version of you that doesn't exist, and the longer they waited, the clearer it became that their calculations were all wrong. This is why your refusal to break cut so deeply. It wasn't just about surviving the pressure. It was about showing that their strategy had no foundation. If breaking you was the centerpiece of their plan and you refused to break, then the whole design collapses in on itself. Suddenly their moves don't look powerful. They look desperate. Their attempts don't look intelligent. They look pathetic. And worst of all, their confidence in their ability to predict and control human limits evaporates. The psychological blow is worse than any physical defeat. Once someone realizes they can't make you collapse, they're left with nothing to leverage. No threats work, no lies stick, no pressure has meaning. You've stripped them of the one thing they believed gave them power, the ability to define your threshold. Now they have to live with the reality that you don't have one. That's what unsettles them most. You didn't just survive, you proved unbreakable. And once someone sees that, they can't approach you the same way again. Every future attempt will feel hollow because deep down they know there is no breaking point to find and no blueprint for control that can work on you. Number 9, you forced them to confront their own smallness. They built their entire sense of importance on comparison. To them, power wasn't about genuine strength or capability. It was about standing over you, keeping you beneath them, and using your struggle as proof of their superiority. They convinced themselves they were tall, but the truth is, their height only existed because you were made to kneel. Their illusion of dominance was never real. It was borrowed from your lowered position. And the moment you stood up, that illusion shattered, forcing them to face the brutal truth of their own smallness. This is why your rise unsettled them so deeply. You didn't just change your position. You destroyed their reference point. Without you beneath them, they have nothing to measure themselves against. Their greatness evaporates the second you refuse to play the role of the one beneath. And now, they're left exposed. Stripped of their pedestal, they don't look powerful anymore. They look ordinary. They don't look towering. They look insecure. And that's a truth they can't handle, because their entire identity was built on being seen as above you. The irony is that your strength didn't shrink them. It revealed their true size. They had always been small, always been dependent on keeping someone else beneath them to feel significant. But when you rose, you forced them to face themselves without the illusion. Now they have to deal with the fact that their power was never authentic. It was propped up by manipulation, lies, and the hope that you would never rise. That realization eats at them. Because once the curtain is pulled back, there's no way to return to the old image. People start to see it too, that their authority was never genuine, that their status was inflated, and that they relied on your submission to appear strong. What once looked like confidence now looks like fragility. What once looked like control now looks like dependency. You didn't just free yourself, you exposed them, and now they are left with the painful reality that they were never giants. They were always small, always ordinary, and only looked tall because you hadn't yet stood at your full height. That truth alone is enough to dismantle everything they thought they were. Number 10, you proved that fear doesn't survive contact with action. Fear was their greatest investment. They didn't need to chain you physically. All they had to do was keep you paralyzed in your own mind. Doubt, hesitation, overthinking, those were the tools they relied on. As long as you stayed still, fear remained alive. But the second you moved, the second you acted, the whole structure collapsed. Because fear has one fatal weakness. It can't survive contact with action. Once you took a step, no matter how small, fear lost its grip and had nothing left to hold on to. They never prepared for that. Their entire strategy depended on you freezing at the edge of possibility, replaying what-if scenarios until exhaustion ate you alive. They thought if they could magnify the risk, amplify the potential losses, and remind you of every past failure, you'd stay stuck. And for a while, maybe it even worked, but the turning point came when you realized that action doesn't just challenge fear, it exposes it. Because when you actually step forward, you discover that most of what fear threatened was smoke, not substance. That's what rattled them most. They had invested so much in keeping you scared, only to watch that fear vanish in an instant. They weren't ready for the shift, because once fear evaporates, so does their leverage. They can't intimidate you anymore. They can't stall your growth. And they can't manipulate hesitation that no longer exists. Their power was never about stopping you. It was about convincing you to stop yourself. And the moment you refused, their influence collapsed. The beauty of action is that it multiplies. One step leads to another, momentum builds, and suddenly what once felt impossible becomes your new normal. Meanwhile, they're stuck, still trying to throw shadows at you, but shadows don't scare someone who's already walking in the open. That's what terrifies them now. You've discovered that fear wasn't real power. It was just a story told loudly enough to keep you from testing it. Now the tables have turned. You've proven that their strongest weapon becomes useless the second you act. And because of that, they know they can never trap you the same way again. Fear no longer owns you, and without it, neither do they. Number 11, you became the question they can't answer. You didn't just catch them off guard, you became the question they can't answer. It's not just that your action was unexpected. It's that Explaining it truthfully would expose everything they've been hiding. That's why they're stuck now, fumbling between silence and half-truths, because no version of their story can cover what you've just done. If they admit the reality, they admit they were wrong. If they twist it, the holes become obvious. If they stay silent, their silence looks like guilt. No matter what, your move leaves them cornered. Their entire confidence was built on being able to define you. They wanted to have the last word about who you are, what you could do, and what limits you supposedly had. But your action cut through that narrative like a blade. It wasn't just about proving them wrong, it was about leaving them with no safe explanation. Because to explain you, they'd have to reveal the schemes, the lies, and the manipulations they've used to keep you boxed in. And that's the one thing they can't afford to do. This is what makes you so dangerous to them now. You're no longer just a person they can target or dismiss. You're a contradiction they can't resolve. Every system they built, every label they placed on you, every whisper campaign they ran suddenly collapses under the weight of your reality. And people notice. The questions start spreading. If they were so sure about you, how did this happen? If they knew your limits, why couldn't they stop you? If their story was true, why doesn't it add up anymore? Each unanswered question chips away at the authority they once carried. For them, this is worse than defeat. Defeat can be explained, but a mystery, a contradiction, a living example that refuses to fit their narrative, that lingers, that haunts. You're not just the one who broke their plans, you're the constant reminder that their words don't match reality. And the more they scramble for explanations, the more obvious it becomes that they don't have one. That's the brilliance of what you did. You didn't just act. You became the question mark they can't erase. And every time they try to explain you away, they only end up exposing themselves further. You're not just outside their control anymore, you're beyond their ability to define. Number 12. You took away the luxury of pretending. You stripped them of their favorite shield, pretending. For so long they relied on appearances to protect them. They wore roles like armor, crafted images to hide their insecurities, and polished their lies until they sparkled enough to pass as truth. As long as you stayed where they wanted you, they could keep up the performance. But when you moved in a way that shattered their expectations, you took that luxury away from them. Suddenly there was no script to follow, no mask to hide behind. What came out of them was raw, unfiltered, and painfully real. That's the moment everything shifted. Because when the act falls apart, what's left isn't strength or composure. It's panic, envy, and desperation. They couldn't disguise it anymore. Their slip-ups became obvious, their reactions too quick, their words too shaky. What they once managed to keep neatly tucked away now spills out in front of everyone, and the contrast is undeniable. The polished image they worked so hard to maintain is now clashing violently with the truth of who they really are. This is the cost of exposure. When someone can no longer pretend, the world finally sees the gap between their image and their reality. And that gap is devastating for them. They no longer look untouchable. They look human, flawed, even fragile. Their anger no longer looks like righteous strength. It looks like insecurity bleeding through. Their silence no longer looks like wisdom. It looks like fear of being found out. Every move they make now reveals more than it conceals, because the curtain has been pulled back. You didn't just catch them off guard, you made it impossible for them to go back to the comfort of performance. Once truth has been seen, there's no way to unsee it. And the people watching can't help but notice the difference. The very ones who once admired their control are now beginning to question how much of it was real in the first place. That's why they're rattled. Pretending was their safe space, the one advantage they could always rely on. But you dismantled it without even needing to expose them directly. You simply moved in a way that forced their mask to slip. And now they're left standing in the open, stripped of their costume, revealing a truth they fought desperately to keep hidden. Number 13, you exposed the difference between control and influence. They always believed that influence and control were the same thing. To them, being able to sway opinions, shape narratives, or push people into certain directions was proof that they held absolute power. And for a while it worked. Influence gave them the illusion of control because people went along with it. But your move revealed a truth they never wanted to face. Influence only works as long as people choose to agree to it. The second that agreement ends, their so-called control collapses into nothing. This distinction is what unraveled their entire system. Influence is persuasion, control is authority. They blurred the lines between the two because they assumed nobody would ever dare challenge them. As long as you accepted their influence, they mistook it for control. But when you stopped agreeing, when you acted outside their grip, you exposed just how fragile their power really was. They weren't in control at all. They were simply borrowing it from the people who allowed themselves to be influenced. Your action forced them to see the gap between perception and reality. They thought their influence was unshakable, but it was only as strong as your willingness to participate. Once you broke away, their voice lost its power. Their manipulations didn't land the same. Their presence didn't carry the same weight. Influence without consent is just noise, and that's exactly what you turned them into. This is why they're so shaken now. Control is permanent, influence is conditional, and you revealed that condition by refusing to play along. Suddenly their empire of persuasion doesn't look like strength, it looks like dependency. They depended on others agreeing to their version of things, and the moment you tore that agreement apart, their foundation crumbled. What they thought was unmovable turned out to be paper thin, held together only by cooperation they no longer had. The hardest part for them is accepting what this says about their identity. They weren't rulers, they were influencers. They didn't hold power, they borrowed it. And once you refused to lend them that power anymore, the illusion ended. Your move revealed the truth in its clearest form. Control is something real, but influence dies the moment people stop believing in it. You ended their spell and they can't cast it again. Number 14. You made them realize they were fighting a ghost version of you. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting the version of you they built in their own minds. That ghost version was easier to handle, easier to predict, easier to attack. They filled it with their assumptions, their lies, and their own limitations, then convinced themselves it was the real you. Every scheme, every plan, every strategy they designed was built to conquer that shadow. But when the real you showed up, everything they thought they knew fell apart. Suddenly their preparation meant nothing because it was never aimed at reality. This is why they're shaken now. They thought they had you figured out, but what they knew was just a projection. They mistook silence for weakness, patience for surrender, humility for fragility. They drew conclusions from fragments and called it certainty. And the worst mistake they made was believing you would stay frozen in the version they invented. But growth isn't something they can account for. Transformation isn't something they can predict. You arrived not as the ghost they rehearsed for, but as the living reality they never prepared to face. That's the danger of underestimating someone. The battle you think you're winning is only happening in your head. They celebrated victories against a phantom, not realizing the real fight hadn't even started, and when you finally stepped forward, they weren't ready. Their weapons, their lies, their alliances, all of it was aimed at a target that no longer existed. They came prepared to face the ghost, but they found themselves staring at you and they had nothing that could stand against the difference. Now they're stuck replaying everything, realizing how much energy they wasted fighting shadows. The truth stings because it forces them to admit they never really touched you. All their attacks hit air, all their strategies hit walls. What they thought was progress was nothing but movement in circles. And when the real you arrived, it made their efforts look ridiculous. That's the wound they can't heal from. It's one thing to lose to the opponent you prepared for. It's another to realize the opponent you trained against never existed at all. You weren't the ghost they built. You were something stronger, sharper, and far more resilient. And now they know the worst truth possible. They have no defense for the real you. What just unfolded wasn't a small disruption. It was a complete dismantling of everything they thought they knew about you. They relied on illusion, but you exposed it. They depended on their narrative, but you made it useless. They confused patience for weakness, but you revealed it as calculation. They mistook influence for control, force for strength, and unity for loyalty. And you stripped every one of those lies bare. The moment you acted outside their script, their entire blueprint dissolved, and what was left wasn't the powerful image they projected, but the raw smallness they'd been hiding all along. You didn't just outmaneuver them, you rewrote the entire game. You became the variable they couldn't control, the question they can't answer, the proof of how powerless they truly are when fear, illusion, and control no longer work. Everything they built relied on the ghost version of you they invented. And when the real you showed up, they had no defense, no plan, no mask strong enough to survive it. That's the beauty of this moment. You didn't need to shout, you didn't need to prove, you didn't even need to explain. Your very existence at full strength was the undoing of their schemes, and now they're left questioning not just you, but themselves, their alliances, their strategies, and the false image they clung to. The truth is simple but brutal. They were never prepared for you, and now that you've moved, they'll never see you, or themselves, the same way again. If this message struck something deep in you, if it made you see the game for what it really is, then don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button and stay connected, because there's more truth coming that they never want you to hear. Like this video, if it spoke to your spirit, drop a comment to share your thoughts and pass it along to someone who needs the reminder that they are not powerless. Share it, spread it, let the right people find it. This isn't just content, it's clarity, and the world needs more of it. Stay blessed always.